Hello and welcome to Read It with Whiskey, the interview podcast featuring self-published sci-fi and fantasy authors. My name is Laura Juntunen and I am your host. I am a self-published author of the Shockwave series, and we've got some big news for the series coming up in just a little bit. But first, let's talk about our guest of the day. Today we are talking with Max B. Sternberg, all about his book, The Rhise of Light. Max lives in Virginia with his wonderful wife and two incredible boys. When he is not working or filling his time with the activities of a husband and dad, he enjoys delving deeper into biblical scripture and telling dad jokes. He strives to live his life as best he can in all areas for Jesus. Max believes that humor, mixed with truth and tied together in a relatable way, can be an amazing way to reach people for the Lord. It is his sincere hope that readers will find his imaginings paired together with biblical truth inspirational for a deeper relationship with Christ. The Rhise of Light is his first literary work, and he is currently working on 2 additional novels for the Darkness Overcome series. So we're going to be talking about The Rhise of Light. So let me give you some information about the book. This is not your typical Christian fiction story. The entirety of living civilization stands on the very brink of death. Undead hordes have rampaged across the world. Determined to do his part, Leon Rhise left his wealthy father's estate and chose to defend the last living kingdom by joining the military. It had seemed to be a good idea at the time. After his career in the airship navy came to an abrupt end, Leon arrived home hoping for a warm reception. Instead, he was abruptly tossed out, disowned, unemployed, and friendless. All hope seems lost. Then Leon discovers a mysterious relic, which opens up the possibility of him becoming a judge, a hero of legend, one that has not been seen for centuries. As Leon travels the road less taken, his destiny converges with newfound companions, each one surrounded by mystery. Advised by strange beings in dreams and visions, Leon learns that the undead onslaught the world has suffered is part of a much larger problem. A solution can be found by learning about the forgotten being known as Adonai. But the world is ending and time is running out. Delve into a world that brings a unique twist and interpretation to faith-based high fantasy. With emotional highs and lows, certain peril, dysfunction, and humor, tough questions are asked and answers will come to light. This book was so much fun. I binge read it. I read it so quickly. I feel like I say that a lot when I'm talking about the books on the podcast. And I think it's because I just choose the perfect books for the podcast. I really enjoy all the books that I read. But this one was really good. I read it really, really quickly, and I'm really excited to see what comes next from Max. So let's dive into the interview. Welcome to Read It with Whiskey, the interview podcast featuring science fiction and fantasy authors. My name is Laura Juntunen, your host and the author of the Shockwave series. I am also a book club moderator, speaker, and avid reader, truly invested in every author's story. Within this podcast, I bring to you, the reader, all the behind-the-scenes secrets to how these guest indie authors bring their books into the world. If you are a sci-fi fantasy reader, then you need to hear from these authors. Let's learn about the person behind the page. Sit back, sip some whiskey, and lean in to these self-published authors. All right, it is time for a little Laura J Live update. And like I said in the very beginning, we have some huge news. I ordered the proof for Oscillation Rising. This is a long time coming, and it took a lot longer than I anticipated getting this book to this point, and it was just a really busy summer, and there's no fault in that. So finally, I have the proof on its way. I'm going to be editing it. The cover is finalized. I have completed all of the front and back matter, and all I really have to do is press publish on Amazon once the proof is edited. So this is really, really excited. And because I can, I am now announcing that the pre-order is live. As of today, I have set the pre-order for September 28th, and the book is going to be out there, guys. I am so excited. So go ahead, head over to Amazon. There's going to be a link in the podcast notes. Go ahead and pre-order Oscillation Rising. And if you haven't read Transient Pulse yet, definitely get on that because you will want to read this ASAP, so then you can jump into that pre-order. And of course, the hard copies will be available on pre-order day, which is September 28th, but the ebook you can pre-order up until then. I would really, really appreciate it if you would pre-order and let me know, take a screenshot, share it on social media with me. This is a long time coming, and I'm just so excited it's finally out here. In other news, now that I have ordered the proof, in the meantime, I am outlining book 3. So book 3 is titled Static Equilibrium. I'm not quite sure if I talked about it on the podcast yet, but I actually switched the name. Originally, it was going to be titled Resonant Frequency, but it was really difficult for me to say that very fluently, and so I decided to switch it to Static Equilibrium. I just like the title more. It makes sense when you think about the whole scientific definitions. All of the titles of the books makes sense once you read the book. In the very beginning of the book, there is a little blurb, and it has the definition of what the title means. So transient pulse, first few pages, you'll find out what a transient pulse is. Same thing for oscillation, and same thing for static equilibrium. So the book cover for Static Equilibrium will be coming out very soon to the public, but you can definitely see it on Patreon right now. So if you're not a Patreon member, definitely hop on it, www.patreon.com/readitwithwhiskey. On Patreon, all my patrons get all of the information early. So they received the book cover for Static Equilibrium, and also they're going to get the first chapter of Oscillation Rising as of today. It is out. They can read that first chapter. So if you want to read the first chapter of book 2, hop into Patreon. You can read it right now. All right, let's get into the interview with Max. This episode of the Read It with Whiskey podcast is brought to you by Coffee Over Cardio. I've been using Coffee Over Cardio for a really long time, and I'm so excited to be an affiliate with them. So there is a link in the bio, but if you want to go there on your own, all you got to do is use my code 10LauraJLive. That's 10 LauraJayLive, and you will get 10% off your order. Max, and welcome to Read It with Whiskey. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to talk to you about your book, The Rhise of Light. But before we jump into the book, there it is for everyone watching the video. We're holding it up. So exciting. Before we talk about it, though, tell our listeners, why did you decide to become a writer?
Well, I always wanted to entertain. And when I was younger, I participated in drama club in middle and high school, several summer school programs. And when I grew up, I knew that I wanted to be a stand-up comedian. I used to go to comedy clubs all the time with my family. Then I figured out that it required a lot of standing to be a stand-up comedian. And so I had to try and find something a little bit different. Beyond that, I've always done sales as kind of like my career job. I've always loved talking to people. And so the book is kind of a culmination of a story idea that I've had for years. And, it's doing a lot of research, but it's definitely something about a message that I wanted to spread. There's a lot of research about, the Bible that I've gone into. It's a Christian fantasy novel, and a lot of Old Testament stuff where if you have a hard time figuring out what happened 2,000 years ago, you should try 3,000 and 4,000 years ago. But once I started doing all of that research, I just couldn't stop. You can't put it down. And so I had this idea about a story, and I thought, man, some of this stuff would go great in the story. And so it just fit perfectly, just, kind of like puzzle pieces going together. All the plot holes filled, all the things that I was trying to write that, was just kind of gaps, they all got filled. And I just thought, all right, let's get this published.
I love it. So this is your first book that you've published. It just went out on June 1st. What did it feel like that first time you held it in your hands?
It was pretty surreal. I actually have the video saved on Facebook. It was the first draft of the copy. It was printed to me and sent from Amazon. There were some minor things that needed to be corrected, but beyond that, just to have it printed and in my hand was crazy. Like this is a brainchild. This was nothing 2 or 3 years ago. There was not one word written down, and now there's a book. It's tangible. How does that happen?
Exactly.
And so that was pretty exciting.
Yeah, super exciting. And yes, I was so excited to get your book because I had heard a bit about it and I loved it. And I'm so excited that I read it because I was really intrigued from the very beginning all the way to the end. I binge read it on all of my free time. And so I'll be waiting for book 2. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But you did self-publish. So you went through Amazon,
Yes.
Like you said. So what was the reason behind that? Why did you choose self-publishing versus the traditional route?
So I really wanted to make sure that I retain control of the content. Some of the things that I write about, especially from a biblical perspective, it can be considered controversial. I don't know if you noticed, but talking about religion, it can get uncomfortable just a little bit. But leaving it up to an editor of a publishing company who hasn't done the same research that I did, it can kind of leave some of the stuff on the cutting floor. So if they didn't have the same vision that I had, that would have been an issue for me. And I definitely wanted to make sure that I got the message out that I wanted to set out.
Yes, I love that. And I think a lot of authors, specifically people I've talked to for the podcast here, control is a very big factor, wanting to make sure that the book is the story that they want to write, not, like you said, the publisher, they might cut stuff out if they don't understand the reality or reason behind putting it into the book. And yes, Christian fantasy can get a little dicey with some people, especially if they're really hardcore Christians. They're like, I don't know if you should really label that as Christian fantasy, versus other people who really like to challenge their religion and like to kind of cut the boundaries. Your Christian religion has a lot to do with different components within the book. So how much of your personal religion and life is used as inspiration within the story? I know that's a loaded question right there.
It is a very loaded question. I would say a lot of what is in here, and what I tried to interweave in here is a lot of biblical truth, and more so than just truth, is not just Bible verses, because you have Bible verses in here. There's an index at the back that all the verses used in the book, which I loved to put in order in there, but also some of the things like context. So when you read the Bible, it's the word of God, and a lot of people just go surface deep. They read it, they don't listen to it. Sometimes they'll go to service, once a Sunday. But when you start learning about some of the things like archaeology and context, what they knew back in that day, a whole new world opens up and you dive into a lot of rabbit holes. I wanted to learn about that. I also wanted to tie in some of my own experiences. And so one of the things that I posted on a blog recently, and it's the first time that I ever publicly started discussing it, was my encounter with my own personal encounter with the demonic. I woke up at like 3 a.m. and I was paralyzed, couldn't move. And normally there would be a blue alarm clock, lights, digits, things like that, but there was nothing. And looking up, there was this shadowy black cloud above the bed. Oh. And it had red eyes in it. Yeah, I know. I mean,
it's so
you're
scary.
Already uncomfortable. I lived
like, no.
And so I wanted to shake my wife awake. She was a Christian longer than I was. Honey, what do we do? But I couldn't move. And so I heard this deep, deep voice, like deeper than James Earl Jones. And it said, I'm not done with you yet. Now, mind you, this was just after a pivotal moment in my walk where I'd had some major breakthroughs. Wow. And so I was a little bit scared. I'd never dealt with this before. And the only thing that I could do was stutter the name of Jesus Christ out, which made it growl and dissolve away. And then things were normal and I could move again. Found out I sweat through the whole, sheets of the bed. It was a pretty frightening experience. Never done that before. And love my wife. She washed the sheets at 3 o'clock in the morning. But I wanted to make sense of what I'd seen. And so when I started to do more research, now it made sense. And you can look at a Bible and, like I said, read into the wording, but if you're not delving deeper and not finding out more, there's more that you're not missing, or there's more that you're missing. And so that's what I, to close the circle, wanted to delve into with this book series. This book series, it's made to entertain, it's made to, evangelize, but it's also made to educate as well. Some of the things that most Christians and most people don't really even know.
I like it. Oh, that was a scary story. But and then also to go with this book, there's a lot of books within Christian fantasy where people, they don't want to read the book because they know it's Christian fantasy. And so they think that you're going to try and convert them. But your book, anybody could pick this up and they could read it. And it's not going to be pressure to understand everything completely. It's just a
Right.
really good book to read. Like you said, it's created to entertain, which it is very entertaining. And I
Well,
was
thank you.
very enthralled the entire time. With all that research, with your own personal experiences with the spiritual world and everything, how did that come together when you were actually putting the book together? Was it difficult to create a storyline that would hold the impact that you hoped it would have?
I mean, I already had some of it in my head.
Okay.
And in case no one knows yet, I'm a little bit of a nerd. I'm a huge nerd. And so writing fantasy for me and weaving in these plots and all of this context and subtext, it was a lot of fun for me. Well, I used to play Dungeons and Dragons as a kid. I'm that big of a nerd. I used to listen to Dungeons and Dragons podcasts and start to envision what would it be like if I had a character and this happened. It was easy for me to see how this all kind of fit together.
Mhm.
And just to give one example in the book, there is a section of the book, and it'll go into book 2 and 3 as well, where they start to delve into this mine. And part of the mine gives way to this ruin. And this ruin, the walls of the ruin are very large stone blocks that all fit together in irregular patterns with no mortar in between them. Now, for a lot of archaeologists, that may sound familiar because there are what's called antediluvian ruins all throughout the world. They are all built very similarly, and they are all hundreds of thousands of years, well, I would say hundreds of thousands, but I would say thousands of years old. For a lay scholar of biblical knowledge, these could very well be ruins that predate any sort of Noah's Ark flood.
Okay.
And so how did they get built? What built them? How were you able to have this? And some of them, like in South America, are earthquake proof. They're built on a slant. So how have they been able to survive all these years when we supposedly had ropes made of hair and very basic tools? That's things that I wanted to try and mesh into this book series, which it gets really cool and enthralling.
Oh, I'm excited because I know what you're talking about within book 1. Oh, yeah, I'm excited for book 2 now. So just so then our readers know a little bit more about what we're talking about, what is the book about? Tell our listeners, what is the Rhise of Light?
I kind of broke the mold with the very long back summary, but to give my own summarization, this book is about healing. This book is about a world that may not be this one, that has completely forgotten God. Also, there is this undead or zombie apocalypse going on. So there we've got our apocalypse fans. I think you're a fan of Apocalypse, if I'm not mistaken, with your book.
Maybe a little bit.
Maybe a little bit. But there's this zombie apocalypse going on, and there's this last kingdom in this world. The main character, Leon Rhise, joined the military at a young age, because it's medieval times. You could do that at medieval times. And he gets kicked out of his home upon his return. There's a lot of subplot and intrigue that starts to interweave. But when he gets kicked out, inadvertently, he knocks a relic, a spear, off of the wall. The first night that he's out on his own, he starts to dream about being called to be a hero for this world. And in this world, the heroes are called judges, much like in the Old Testament, where you have the book of Judges. And so he starts meeting all these new people, and pretty soon he, encounters in this village a very surly dwarven blacksmith who likes to crack a lot of jokes. And
I love him.
Oh yeah, he's one of the fan favorites. And then Miala, who's very soft-spoken and tries to keep to herself. And then Miala's dog, which seems a little bit smarter than normal. And then they start to uncover these secret plots, and they go on adventures. And in the meantime, he's learning more about this forgotten god and how it ties in to how the world the way it is. This is the first in at least 3 books. The book ends on, I would say, a slight cliffhanger, but we stay with him all throughout the book until the epilogue, where it switches to a different character and you learn a little bit more.
Yeah, we won't tell them what happens, but oh, it's so good. There's so much to unpack, and I know we're not gonna be able to talk about everything within this story, but I did want to touch on your world in its entirety. You had to create an entire world for this book. What did that feel like?
So it was a lot of fun. I come from a family of creators. My mother was a middle school art teacher for 25 years, and my father has been a graphic designer his entire career. So very artistic family, very, very, spontaneously creating. So this was a heck of a lot of fun. Developing the magic system, I didn't want a cookie cutter magic system.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to have the least amount of tropes as possible. So that's why the main character has a spear instead of a sword. But for the magic system, a lot of people use the common Greek elements of, earth, fire, wind, water. I wanted to kind of expand upon that. And so for those who haven't read the book yet, the magic system is such that there is a guild of people, or, magic users are called mancers. And so mancers, they inherit their magic at usually a very young age from a traumatic experience. Miala, one of the main characters, is a pyromancer. So, she manipulates fire. She doesn't get burned, which actually, when she starts to interact with some of the other characters' interests, it actually becomes pretty cool what she can do. But to expound more upon just the 4 Greek elements, I started to want to incorporate things involving, gravity, or mind or kinetic manipulation. An empath, people who can control emotions or control you. And that opened up the schools of magic to a little bit more than your traditional cookie cutter magic system. Because I wanted this to be fun. I wanted it to be unique. But creating the world, I just created this one kingdom. It's supposedly the last kingdom in this world. Depending on the popularity, I might be able to expand upon that world. Exactly. So it's a lot of fun.
World building is really exciting. And one of the reasons I am holding off on a fantasy book of my own, because I want to develop that world in a larger way. So that's why I started with sci-fi, because my book that's out, it's a very similar world that we're in now. There's just an apocalypse happening. And it didn't take too much world building, if that makes sense. So that whole concept of world building, it's so exciting. It's so much fun to do. I'm excited to see what you bring out for book 2 and 3, and hopefully, like 10 more. Just keep it going. Maybe.
Book short stories, anthologies, you never know.
There you go. That'll work. Let's talk about a few of the characters. Our main character is Leon. We meet a bunch of different other main characters, but who is your favorite? If you wanted to just go off of that one. Some people, their favorite is the main character, but other people, their favorite is more so the person they enjoy to write the most.
For a while, my favorite character doesn't even have a name. There's one scene in the book where they meet at a tavern, and the waiter is this goblin. Doesn't speak a word, but he is trying to break out of the social status of goblins. They're very low class. They don't do a whole lot in high society, but it's a nice tavern. So he's dressed in his very formal suit, and he runs around, filling drinks without, spilling a drop. And I as soon as I started writing this character, I fell in love immediately. He's got this big toupee that flaps off him as he's running around. And I will never name him. No name will be good enough for this character, but I will always love this character.
Interesting. I like that you picked someone that you wouldn't second guess at, I like that. I had a few favorites. I'm always the sucker for when there's an animal in the story. So the puppy, I love the puppy. But I also like the dog's relationship with the owner, Miala. I really liked her. And then Duame, the dwarf, because of his personality and his humor, he just kept me laughing the whole time. So I really liked him too.
Oh yeah, they're all wonderful. And each of them, their backstories, as you learn, some of them can be quite traumatic.
Yes.
And those are typically the hardest people who kind of come to faith. For a person who's experienced family loss, or a person who's experienced abuse, typically they're just, angry with the idea of the fact that there could be a God. So how could you deal with it? And that's one of the other things that I wanted to address with the story. But you'll also notice that with some of those characters, they have roots in the Bible. Like Duame, he's my Job character. Job, if you're not familiar in the Bible, it's a very poetic book, but he loses everything, but he doesn't lose his faith. Well, Duame lost everything, and he kind of doesn't have faith to begin with. How do you deal with that? And then Miala, she and Leon have a abused past. Another character you meet later on, who's going to become a staple of the series, she thinks she knows everything, and so when she encounters something that she doesn't know, she doesn't like it.
A know-it-all character type.
Yeah.
And then there's other characters that we have to bring up. The god of this world.
Adonai.
Adonai.
Well, Adonai is one possible interpretation.
Okay.
Adonai.
That's how I read it originally. But we have him, and then we have Rohiel. I don't know.
Rohiel.
Okay. And then Lachematel.
Lachematel.
It's
all right.
See, I can't pronounce all these. So tell us, who are these people and why are they important to the story?
So Adonai, pretty simple. It's God. That's one of the names for God. It is basically Lord in Hebrew. The other two names are also Hebrew. Rohi, it kind of means guide. It's not quite rabbi, which means teacher, but it's more so guide, which is interesting because he helps guide Leon. If you add El at the end of it, then that means of God. So guide of God, suddenly that makes sense. Lachematel. Now, Lachemet in Hebrew is female warrior. And so by adding El at the end, we suddenly have female warrior of God. She is also probably one of my favorite characters because she seems very two-dimensional at first until you start interacting with her more, and then you realize there's a little bit more depth there.
That depth is so cool. Within the story. I loved how these characters came about. And these characters are what you had mentioned earlier. Leon has visions. And so these people come to him when he's sleeping and they really help guide him through the rest of the story. And we're just going to put it at that. We're not going to talk anything more about that. But let's dive into some other characters that are more of a new, basically an apocalypse. The undead. What are the undead? Who are these people? Why are they here?
The undead. You are starting to get in some spoilers.
You can just do a little bit. Just tell us the basics.
All right. So in this world, very much like your traditional zombie apocalypse movie or TV show, you die. A couple minutes later, you come back as an undead. Now, there are several different types of undead. There are, your regular shamblers, which are just, your mindless drones, so to speak, that they're the kind of lowest class. Then I guess you would have your wretches as the next class, which are a little bit more sinister. They kind of have the ability to, scratch you, and your thoughts kind of become muddled or addled. You meet other type of undead as well. And so, but then there's other undead too.
Yes, we won't go into any more details there. So I feel like if we did talk anything more about it, we would hit all of the spoilers. So we're going to kind of pause on book one. Tell us, you're writing book two right now. Yes. So without telling us what happens at the end of book one, can you kind of elaborate on what book two is going to be about? Kind of like a little hint for us?
Yeah, absolutely. It goes more into Old Testament kind of Genesis 6 lore. And so there are these things in the Bible called Nephilim giants, and they're actual giants. Goliath. People are familiar with the story of David and Goliath. Goliath was a descendant of giants. There are also giant skeletons that have been uncovered that anyone with a Google search or DuckDuckGo search can see. But it goes more into the depth and lore about giants. It goes more into biblical allegories, like, things like Garden of Eden or Exodus, things like that. And then I always enjoy, for this book one, I enjoyed asking two questions and answering one. And then book two will start to answer a few more, but still ask more questions.
Right.
And the book three will tie up all the questions, hopefully. And, if there's more demand and, it becomes popular, maybe tie up most of the questions and leave some short stories and other books.
Well, cool. I'm excited to see how the characters develop and continue on with book two. I think it'll be really, really exciting. But like I said, I think we're going to go into spoilers if we talk too much more about the book. I just want everybody to go and read it. But this wouldn't be Read It with Whiskey without talking a little bit about whiskey. So what is your favorite whiskey to drink?
I've only had whiskey a couple times in my life and I didn't care for it. I haven't had it in a while, actually. We do, however, have wine. Maybe we drink it about once a year. It is homemade. It's all from my wife's late grandfather. Wonderful, wonderful person. Anytime we open a bottle, we drink in remembrance of him. But homemade wine, if you know how to do it, it's legit.
That's where it's at. I've had some homemade wine. I haven't had it in a long time. I've never made it myself either, but I think that's something that I would like to do. I mean, I would like to make my own whiskey too, so maybe that'll happen.
Maybe.
All right, Max. Well, this was so much fun. But before you go, tell our listeners, where can they find you and where can they go and buy your book?
All right. Well, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on MeWe. You can look at my website, Max, M-A-X-B, letter B, Sternberg, STERNBERG.com. I'm already on Amazon and Kindle. You can purchase the paperback and the ebook there right now. It is free for Kindle Unlimited if you got Kindle Unlimited. There was an update to my website recently, and now readers can submit their own interpretation of the characters or scenes that they enjoyed from the book to the website, and it will be posted there. So everyone can see your artwork.
Interactive. I love it.
Exactly. So I figured it was a nice thing for readers to immerse themselves further into the story. When I'm not on social media, you can usually reach me on the website contact. Mm-hmm. And I hope everyone enjoys the book. If you love the Bible, high fantasy, undead apocalypses, mystery, action, adventure, or just a really good story, pick it up.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I had so much fun talking with you.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura.
Talking with Max was so much fun. We had a really great time, and there is some content that I had to cut out because of time. We talked for quite a bit, and I would love for you guys to watch the full unedited video version. And again, that's on Patreon. So if you're not a patron already, hop on it. There's so much content in there, all the video interviews. It's incredible over there. So it was so much fun to talk to Max. Obviously, you could hear it in our voices. We had a great time talking about his characters and his setting and everything about his book. I am just so excited to read the next book. Hopefully it'll be coming out soon, and we'll definitely keep an eye and ear out for that. And I'll let you guys know as soon as I hear anything. And coming next week, we are going to talk with Douglas W.T. Smith all about his novella, The Shadow of the Wicked. This is a really fun, quick read. It is dark fantasy, very interesting settings and characters. I'm not going to give you too much right now. You'll have to come back in the next episode to talk to Doug with me. But we do go into the whole novella versus novel concept. Should I write a short book and call it a novella, or should I put a little bit more fluff in there and call it a novel? It's really interesting when people begin writing. They're like, oh yeah, I'm going to write a novel. It's going to be easy to write that many words. But it's actually quite a challenge. So we're going to talk about that in the next episode. So definitely tune in. I'll talk to you guys next time. You've been listening to an episode of Read It with Whiskey. I am your host, Laura Juntunen, and I just wanted to personally hop in and say thank you so much for listening. Your support of the podcast means so much to me, and I would really appreciate it if you could go onto your favorite podcast platform and rate and review the show. By rating the show, you're going to help more people find the podcast, so then we can grow. Once you review the show, share it on your social media. Share your favorite episode with your friends, and come back next time to hear more from self-published authors. I'll talk to you soon.